This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast, man. We have some interesting Southern comedy for you today. We ran into this gentleman. I was doing some guest speaking on some other podcasts, and I met this very funny guy. He's been doing comedy over a decade. He hails from Nashville, Tennessee. Please welcome to the show, Brian Swinford. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Man, thank you for having me. Thank you so much. This is cool.
Well, you and I got a chance to chat when I was on your podcast, and I found your story interesting, and I wanted to share it with my audience. I know you've been doing comedy for about 10 to 12 years, but let's explain to the audience that Nashville, Tennessee doesn't sound like a hotbed of comedy. I mean, it sounds bigger than it's probably about the same as where I'm at in Sacramento, but not like Boston, New York, or LA. How did you end up getting into comedy?
Yeah, so Nashville is absolutely nothing like Boston, New York, or LA. It was, especially, I moved here about 15 years ago, and it was, I mean, there was a handful of open mics, but it was absolutely not a hotbed for comedy, but it happened to be the biggest city, the closest big city to where I'm from in Western Kentucky, so it just made sense, and I absolutely no other thought went into it other than, hey, it's the closest big place to me. I mean, if I could go do it again, I would probably go to New York or Chicago, but
But compared to Kentucky, Nashville was the zone for you.
It's so funny because my wife is actually from San Francisco, and so to her, Nashville feels, small and quaint, but I'm from a town in Western Kentucky with 2,000 people. And I mean, Nashville was a mecca of other cultures and comedy and music and all this other stuff. So yeah. So when I moved here, it was definitely a lot more than what I was used to, but, it is, the scene has grown quite a bit. There's been some funny guys come out of Nashville, and there's shows all over. We've got more than one club now. So it is night and day better now than it was
10 years ago.
15 years ago.
Well,
yeah.
that's interesting, and I want to hear more about Nashville a little bit later, but you being from a small town in Kentucky, how did you even find stand-up comedy? It wasn't one of the biggest variety arts.
No, absolutely not. And I actually didn't start comedy until I was 27. That's when I moved to Nashville. Where I'm from, like a lot of rural places, I mean, people graduated high school, either went to college or you got a job. That was what you did. And so that's what I did. I went to school in Kansas City and moved back home and was working, and got to a point where I knew I wanted to perform. I didn't know what that meant exactly. I can't sing and I'm not a very good actor, but I've always been, the funny kid. And so I just Googled, this may have been before Google, actually, I don't remember, but I Yahoo'd, comedy, stand-up comedy classes, and there was one in Nashville that had great reviews. We were about 2 hours away, so I drove to Nashville for 2 months taking writing classes and then performance classes, and I got through with those, and I was like, I think I can do this. I think I want to be a comic, but I didn't even know stand-up comedy was an option because where I grew up, there was no comedy club. The only stand-up comedy we saw was like the Robin Williams and Eddie Murphy, the HBO specials, and the big name guys. And I honestly thought once you became a movie star or a TV star, then you got to do stand-up. I didn't realize all those guys did stand. Yeah, I had no idea that stand-up comedy was even a thing. I thought after you became famous, that was your reward, was to get to go do stand-up comedy, not not the other way around.
Oh, Brian, that's so interesting. So a lot of people realize that stand-up comedy is more a vehicle to other things. They'll start out in stand-up and become an actor, or they'll go in, stay a stand-up, or they become a writer. There's so many things you can end up doing, voiceover work, but stand-up comedy, going up as an opening actor, an MC somewhere, is usually the beginning of a career. and you being from such a small town, you thought it was kind of the other way around. So that's fascinating. And was there, when you started doing comedy in Nashville, or took that course, which I think is interesting because you didn't feel like you were naturally a comic, you took a course to kind of find your voice on stage. What was it like the first time you got on a stage?
Well, so I was always kind of the funny guy, but as far as like honing it into a craft, that was, I guess the classes were the first time that I thought, okay, it's not, these guys don't just get on stage and they don't just talk. I mean, there's a lot of craft that goes into it. There's a lot of work and whittling away a joke until it's great. And so that was kind of the stuff I learned after I took the class. I felt, okay, this is something I can do. I can sharpen any natural talent I have and make it a little bit better and give this a shot. But what was cool about the class, I say it was cool, but it kind of set me up with unrealistic expectations at first, because there was probably 10 or 15 of us in the class. And when you graduated, we all got to do 5 or 7 minutes, whatever it was, but it was at the comedy club, Zanies, here in Nashville, which is a phenomenal club, been around for decades.
Oh yeah, Zanies is famous club. That's a good one.
Yeah. It was a great home club. But so my very first time on stage was the graduation show. And I mean, Zanies holds, 225, like it's a big club, and it was packed with everybody that loved us and wanted us to succeed. And every joke hit, every ad lib hit. Like it was this great. I remember getting done with, we all got standing ovations because it was all our friends and family. And I think, I can do this. This is not hard.
But that's a great human interaction that
totally. Yeah.
They totally invite your family and friends to support you. You get that amazing response. And both of us know, because we've been in the business a long time, that when you're doing it to strangers, it's a whole different ballgame.
It's way, way different. Yeah. I remember thinking, okay, if this is comedy, as good as this feels, I can do this every night. That's not a big deal. I would love to do this. And then, my next show was my very first like real open mic. And I mean, I'm talking, it was a real comic open mic where, if there's 30 people in the crowd, 22 of them were comics and the other 6 didn't know there was comedy at the bar and they're irritated. And so it was this big, like, welcome to real comedy type open mic. But I guess I'm glad I had that first experience to kind of, okay, that's what I'm shooting for, and it's going to take a lot of work to get there. But it was definitely a rude awakening going from a sold out Zanies comedy club of loved ones to a bunch of comics that don't give a crap if you're alive or not.
I think that's so great that you shared that, Brian. That is such a true experience, that when we are, I think you said it very well, that you took the course, you worked at it, you had a killer set in front of family and friends. It gave, got the endorphins going, gave you that feel of what it's like to make people laugh, which is just unbelievable. But then the reality hits and you're in front of those 22 other comics. Do you remember any of your first jokes?
Oh God, no, not even a little bit.
That might be a good thing.
Yeah, it may. The only thing that I remember is I did get laughs, and I didn't die, and nobody else died. That's the only. I remember thinking, okay, I didn't do great, but I'm not hurt. Nobody's mad at me. It's just come back and work at it better. But no, that was. I guarantee you, every joke that I had was out of my comedy class notebook, so I don't know how good they were, but it was fun. It was a good sense. There were only 2 comics, and I still am in touch with them to this day, that came up afterwards, and they're like, oh man, that was great. Welcome, blah, blah, blah. But everybody else was just typical, cynical comic worrying about their own set. I thought it was, I've always appreciated that a couple of guys were like, hey, you're new. I'm going to just take a second just to be nice to you. And that was very cool. And it always reminded me, hey, just say a nice word to the new guys, because they're as scared as you were back in the day.
Right. And you'll find that, as you've already been doing it 10 years, so you've already found that there is a sense of community amongst the semi-pro and professional comics, that 8 out of 10, I'll say generously 8 out of 10, are going to be supportive, helpful, may give you advice, be able to sit as peers and talk about comedy, because that's a great way to learn by gleaning from other professionals or other peers if they're all new. And also in my book, 20 Questions About Being a Stand-Up Comic, I share that it's so important to watch other comics because you'll learn the important nuances of stand-up comedy, when to take a breath, when to do a callback, some of the basics that I'm sure you figured out. That first course that you took, it sounds fascinating. Did it teach you the importance of writing on a regular basis?
Absolutely. That was one that probably the biggest thing I took away. The biggest thing I took away from the class was right. And it sharpens that muscle in your brain. It gets better. But not just to write, like to write for a purpose. And there are little tricks, there's certain ways to say things, or there's certain, like a rhythm to a punchline that where if you know these things, it will make your jokes a little bit better. And that was really, really stressed in that writing class, was to write, because that's the only way you're going to get better, is to keep doing it.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point. There's a rhythm to the voice, the comedy voice. It's almost like music. You want to take the audience on a journey, and that means that there's low, quiet parts where you're getting them engaged, and then there's the crescendo where you bring out the punchline, and it's kind of repeated over and over. When you were working in Nashville, we kind of jumped ahead. What was your career? What were you doing when you came out of school?
Oh, wow. So I went to a Bible college in Kansas City, and I was a youth minister. I worked with kids, which was great for me because I got to be a smart aleck and got to be a funny youth pastor. And it kind of, once I started doing comedy, I was still living at home for a little bit. So I was driving back and forth from from Kentucky to Nashville. And so it was cool to kind of have a platform where I could work in some of the stuff that I've been learning into just, if I was teaching or whatever I was doing. It was kind of interesting to work on comedy techniques in front of a crowd that wasn't necessarily looking for comedy. So I knew, if I was teaching, 20, 15-year-olds that were there, probably because they were being forced to by their parents, but if I could get them to laugh, like that was a good sign to me that I was able to get a group of people that weren't there to laugh. And so I got to kind of work at that for a few weeks before I actually moved to Nashville. And when I was back home, though, I was bivocational. I was a youth pastor, and I was working every blue collar job that I could find to make ends meet and pay the bills and stuff. So I was just doing that. And I think that's kind of why I was a little frustrated, because I kept working all these hard, crappy jobs, and I was like, I just want to perform. I just want to be up in front of people doing stuff. And so I guess that kind of that blue collar background pushed me to do something different. And I don't know if I'd had an easy job, I don't know if I ever would have pushed myself to start actually doing comedy when I was almost 30.
Well, it is a late age to get started, but Rodney Dangerfield and others have proven that there's no age for stand-up comedy as long as you're funny. And I wanted to just say, as a California kid, that it's interesting that this man from Kentucky and Tennessee is really, going along with everything we've heard. You're right out of the Bible Belt, and you're working as a youth pastor. And I would have thought, it kind of exactly as you said, that having an inclination for stand-up comedy had to help you engage and relate to the kids and made you a more popular, better youth pastor. But also, once you transition to comedy, I imagine you can share with the audience, did working with the kids and being a youth pastor kind of open up some material for you as a stand-up comic?
It's funny because I've been asked that a few times, and honestly, no, I never really wrote about my time doing that stuff. And I don't know why. I think when I started, I was just trying to write a funny joke. And then after a few years got my rhythm, I had enough going on. I was just talking about what was going on in my life then. So now I don't know that I really got material from it, but
hey, I was just saying maybe you missed an opportunity. I've worked with kids before, and usually there's something comes out of it, but that's fine, Brian. I think that that's still interesting that even though you didn't take material from being a youth pastor and turn it into stand-up, being a stand-up comic and having that inclination as a young adult made you a better youth pastor. I mean, I think that's not only interesting, but easy to see. And congratulations on your work with the kids. It's so important that teenagers have someone to connect to. And you are absolutely correct that whenever you can engage with an audience, and that doesn't matter if it's a paid club audience or a bunch of teenagers that need some guidance, if you can get them laughing, if you can entertain them in a way while sharing a message, that engagement's going to be that much stronger. And I don't know if that was your actual goal and mental thinking at the time, but that's what you were doing.
100%, absolutely. And it's funny because my main focus back then would have been, whatever I was teaching about or whatever, but like, I'm still at heart a comic, and I'm still, self-involved and a little narcissistic and a little self-promotion. So like, I would judge if I got to do a sermon or a teach or whatever. I would kind of judge, okay, how many laughs did I get? Did I get enough laughs? And not even necessarily worried about the message, but were people laughing at me? And then if so, then that was a successful sermon.
Well, that's very honest of you to share. You could have gotten away with, no, I was all about the children. But still, now you've been doing comedy for over 10 years, and you're a professional. You're working clubs like Zanies and other places. Why don't we share with the audience, when you're getting going in Nashville, what were some of the places that you could do stand-up other than Zanies? Were there other places?
Well, so back then, that was our only club was Zanies. So what you would have to do is just and the good thing about Nashville is there's literally a stage everywhere. Every bar has a stage. Every restaurant has a stage. Every coffee shop has a stage. Like, there's an abundance of stages here in town. And so that wasn't hard. It was just, you would book a room or somebody else would book a room, and they would put you on your show, and then you promoted it and tried to get as many people in there as you could. But that was, besides just the open mic scene, I mean, that was probably at first the biggest the most stage time that I got was just doing other people's shows. And then, you and your buddies save up some money and book a room and then do your show, and just everybody just kind of kept the scene going on their own, which was cool back then. And it really built that camaraderie that you were talking about, where like we're all kind of in this together to promote this scene. Now that the scene's a lot better here, like I hope that it's still like that. But back then it was definitely like, we're all in this together. So let's just book shows and get as many people in as we can so that we can get as much stage time, because back then stage time was so precious because you had to work to get it. You couldn't just, it's not like I've been to New York several times, and like you can get on stage 5 or 6 times in a night if you hustle there. Like, we weren't even getting on stage that many times in a week back then. So, you kind of had to make it happen yourself back then.
Yeah, but I think that you bring out a good piece of advice for young comics that are going to be following in your path, and that is, and it's been said on the podcast, but it's so important to reiterate that you want to get on stage as much as you can, and it really doesn't matter where that stage is. It could be a laundromat, a bar, a restaurant. And in the case of Nashville, where music is king, there was really, I'm assuming, a lot of opportunities to find stages that weren't comedy clubs, but gave you an opportunity to get in front of an audience. And each and every time you did, whether you realized it at the time or not, you were honing your craft, you were getting sharper and better, and dealing with all those different audiences and situations made you a better comic. But I think that's fascinating, and kind of where I was leading you was that I assume Nashville being the music town that it is, that there were stages you could play. I'm assuming you've opened for a few bands.
Yeah, I made that mistake a few times to open for this. Yeah.
Well, I didn't look at it as a mistake, but I think that
oh my God.
it was challenging, huh?
So the first time I ever did it, there was this old club in downtown Nashville called 12th and Porter, because that's the street it was on. And it was, I mean, it'd been there forever. Great club. And I got somehow invited to go to this charity thing, and the headlining band was Lady Antebellum, which, if any of your audience isn't country music fans, that's a pretty big band. They're a pretty big band. And so so the way it went, it was a comic, then a musician, a comic, then a musician, and there's probably 8 comics, 8 musicians until Lady Antebellum headlined. So anyway, so I'm still new. I mean, I've probably been doing it a year or two at this point, and I did not realize that if people had just heard music, if they'd just been listening to a band, as soon as that band stops, they're going to want to talk. They're not going to want to listen to some guy trying to tell jokes about something. Like, they want it to be loud, and they want to talk because they haven't been able to talk for 2 or 3 songs. And so that was just like such a eye-opening experience to have to fight for people's attention and have to compete with music. It was cool because I met some famous musicians, but like it was not something I enjoyed. It was definitely a learning experience. But throughout, I was going to say, throughout the rest of my time here, there's been music and stuff, but for the most part in Nashville, there's not a lot of, you don't really mix the two. I don't know why that is. I guess you have to intentionally book a show with music and comedy, but that's not ever been a huge thing here.
Oh, that's interesting. I just naturally thought that, for example, back in the 60s and 70s in the Catskills and some of the tourist spots outside of New York and the East Coast, I don't know about the South, but still a lot of the clubs or a lot of the places, the vacation spots that people would go to, they would have shows, and it was almost always a crooner, your Frank Sinatras and stuff like that, Dean Martins, and they would be opened, or MC would be a comic, and that's how people got their start back in those days. And in Nashville, I would have thought that would have been a more natural combination, but you're absolutely correct. I've heard nightmare stories of guys, ladies and gentlemen, before we have Santana, we're going to have a stand-up comic, and it's an outdoor show, and everyone's stoned, and they're not listening to the comic, but still, and I want to make this clear as a producer, still, that is a stand-up experience that makes you a better person to get through it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I'm so glad that you shared that. Now, you've been doing comedy a while now. I know you've had some other adventures I want to get to in just a minute, but before we leave your life purely as a comic, what was one of your best experiences on stage?
Oh, that's a great question.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, this isn't your first interview, is it? That was a professional question. I got to open for Ralphie May one time.
Ralphie May is a famous comic.
Yeah, he was the first kind of big name guy I ever got to open for, and I remember. I don't remember my set. I don't remember anything about that, but I remember sitting in the green room with him and his opener and some other guys before and after, we were just all comics. It didn't matter that I'd been doing it a couple of years and he'd been, had special after special, stand-up special, we were just all a bunch of comics trying to make each other laugh and just being silly. Like that was very encouraging to me, because I was like, okay, like these guys they don't have superpowers. They just work really hard at what they do. And if I work really hard, then I can figure it out as well. So that was a very cool stand-up experience. And that's always kind of impressed me. Like, we're getting to hang out with guys that, like, I remember I got to hang out in the green room with John Witherspoon one time. And it was like, this guy is iconic. And he's just a dude. He's just a dude drinking wine and listening to all of us be silly. Like that camaraderie that you talked about earlier. Like, just when you meet somebody that is big enough to be a jerk, and then they're just super cool. Like, that's such an encouraging thing for a young comic.
Oh, that's a great story to share. And it is so true that, as I mentioned earlier, 8 out of 10 comics are real down to earth. They appreciate their peers. I got a chance to work with Robin Williams a couple times. And off stage, he was a quiet, nice, shared with other comics, loved the community of stand-up. And
That's awesome.
But I also have worked with people like Gary Shandling and a few others that when they got famous, even though I helped them get started, became kind of arrogant and pissy about things. Dennis Miller is another great example of a guy that worked my club a lot. And then when he got big, he enjoyed kind of stepping on the people that he grew from.
Wow.
But we don't want to go too negative, but I think that's great that you had those good experiences. And I think it's also important that the audience realizes that your best experience in comedy wasn't necessarily something on stage, but it was the interactions with other professionals off stage that really brought you some sense of success and joy. I think that's a great story, Brian. The opposite being true, other than that music situation, has there been a really embarrassing road story or moment that kind of brought the reality of stand-up comedy to you?
Oh man, I've got way more of those than I do of the happy moments.
well, just give us one idea.
That's probably not fair to say. I mean, all the times that I've been on stage, I feel like even if I didn't do great, like you did well enough that you're like, all right, I got to work on some stuff, but like I still just got to do comedy. Like that's not a bad gig anytime you get to do stand-up comedy. So there's been definitely more good times than bad, but there's been some rough shows. I remember we were talking about open mics. There was an open mic here called Big Tony's, and I started doing it. It was on Monday nights, and it was, just your regular redneck bar, like nothing special, but it had a few people in there, but it was on Monday night. So once Monday Night Football started, the place was packed and they still wanted to keep doing the open mic. And so
that's rough.
I remember being on stage and like just pausing and thinking, nobody wants me to be here. Like I am interrupting them watching the football game that they got out of their house to come down here and watch. And so it was one of those where like you either give up and get off stage, or you're like, you know what, I'm going to get your attention. And that was one of those like bars that really made you learn how to be better. Which, a lot of open mics are like that, but
it's kind of a do or die situation, right? You have to force yourself, because people that are people that are less involved in their career choice just capitulate and walk off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a similar experience to the worst. And it was bad. And I've heard some horror stories where like people really have bad road gigs, and this was it was bad in a funny way. Me and two of my buddies, we drove. It's probably an hour and a half outside of Nashville, out in the middle of nowhere. One of my comic buddies, his sister was head of the PTO in their school, or PTA or whatever it is, and they were doing their Halloween fall festival carnival deal. And so we were going up there with the intention of entertaining the parents while the kids were off playing games and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, all right, that'll be fun. They'll appreciate us being there and giving them some entertainment. And so we get there, and no part about this will I exaggerate. It is 100% true. It was in a hallway, like an elementary school hallway. There were two chairs, like folding chairs. One had a microphone laying on it, and the microphone was attached to it like a bullhorn, like a megaphone. That was the PA system. There were folding chairs, not with parents or even teachers. It was about 20 elementary school kids.
No.
And we look at each other like, what, dude, what? Like, and we weren't dirty. Like, we all worked pretty clean. So like that was an issue, but we're still comics, and there's like 3 or 4 parents in the whole crowd. And we're like, all right, let's paper, rock, scissors to see who goes up and eats it first. And luckily I got to go first, and I got my set out of the way, and I got to come back and watch my two buddies just eat it on stage in front of a bunch of kids. The best part, and this, I think if it had been an adult that said this, it would have been stupid, but kid in the front row, like, as God is my witness, he just interrupts. He goes, "Hey, when's the comedy start?" And he wasn't being ironic. He wasn't being funny.
He was being true.
When are you guys going to start being funny?
Oh, that's so funny.
It was awesome. And finally, my buddy and I'm doing air quotes, headlined that show. He was throwing out everything, and finally he just goes, "Hey, who likes SpongeBob?" And all the kids were like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Thank you. That was my time," and got off like he closed on complete pandering to a bunch of second graders. It was awesome.
Oh, yeah, that would be a rough gig, and especially when you're not prepared for it. There is really no good way to entertain children with stand-up comedy unless, now you're a father now, but I guess you could get away with dad jokes, really bad puns and maybe physical comedy. But I think that's fun. Thank you for sharing that, Brian.
You're welcome.
When you're told you're going to be doing one thing and then you show up and it's something else. And then on top of it, there's no professional lighting, no professional sound. You're just thrown to the wolves. And in this case, children, which is, as we've heard from W.C. Fields and others, are the hardest people to work with. And I think that that one child's reaction, when's the comedy start, is such a, out of the mouth of babes, right? They don't know how to lie, so they're just being real. I think,
and that ended up being the absolute funniest line of the whole show. Was
I bet the parents loved it.
Kid that can't even read yet. Yeah.
Well, Brian, it's going through those kinds of situations that make you a better comic. Now, you have been doing stand-up comedy off and on for over a dozen years. And what I wanted to share with the audience is that you took it in a unique direction. In fact, earlier I alluded to the fact that stand-up comedy is a great vehicle to get to, directing, producing, writing, being a professional comic on TV, doing corporates, doing cruise ships. There's so many things you can do once you've honed your craft as a comic, but you went a really unique route. Can you share with the audience the comedy tours you were doing in Nashville?
Oh, absolutely. It was a very fortunate, I knew somebody that knew somebody type deal. I'd been doing comedy for 4 or 5 years at that point. And I mean, on stage, I was very PG. Like I could push the envelope a little bit for one crowd and bring it back in for another. So kind of not offensive, I guess, let's put it that way. And a guy that we had, a mutual friend, wanted to start a comedy sightseeing bus tour here in Nashville. And now, if y'all come to Nashville now, Broadway is insane. I mean, I put it up there with the Vegas Strip or the French Quarter. I mean, it is just absolutely insane. There's tractors pulling drunk chicks. There's mobile hot tubs pulling drunk chicks. There's limos with the tops cut off pulling drunk chicks. Like, that's everywhere you go downtown Nashville.
I'm sensing a theme: drunk chicks.
Yeah, drunk chicks is what has made this city go from kind of popular to one of the hottest cities in the country right now. And that comes with both good and bad, but we'll talk about that next time maybe, because that's a long story. So the guy approached me with this idea to start a comedy sightseeing bus tour. And I'm a history nerd anyway. I always have been. That's what I majored in college. And
interesting, Brian.
Yeah. And so the idea to take tourists around and tell jokes while I'm teaching them about Nashville, that was like right up my alley. I thought that was kind of cool. Now, the theme of it was very Southern and very rednecky, which I was like, I just don't want it to be cheesy. Like, I'm a stand-up comic. I don't want it to feel like, Gatlinburg or Branson. I want it to be legit funny. And so that took a little while for us to kind of get on the same page with that. But once we did and we started rolling, I had 2 hours. Every tour was 2 hours, and we did 2 a day. And so it took us about a year to really get going. But once we did, I went from doing, one or two shows, a week to now I've got stage time. I've got 4 hours of stage time, 6 to 7 days a week. Sometimes more if we did private tours and everything. And so it really, really helped me to get better just because I was doing it every single day for hours at a time. And I had complete control over the character. I had not complete control over the script, but like I could do the kind of jokes that I wanted to do, and I could make the character be whatever I wanted it to be for the most part. And so I really started treating it as like a one-man comedy show on a bus. And each bus held about 40 people. And it was, for me, growing as a performer, it was great because I was making money now, and I could not have to work some crappy job and then, stay out till midnight doing an open mic and then getting up and do it again. I was able to pay my bills from doing comedy. But I did that for 12 years, and I was in front of every possible crowd you can imagine. I can't think of any type of crowd that I wasn't in front of. And so I had to learn how to make, it may be a bus full of drunk bachelorettes, or it may be a family reunion with somebody's grandma and her great grandkids, and I had to figure out how to make what I did work across the board. And that was fantastic. And it was fun because for as long as I did it, I think if it was the same type of crowd every day, it would have gotten old really quick. But it was such a diverse crowd every single day that it was just fun. I enjoyed showing up, and I didn't necessarily do improv, but I did a lot of crowd work. And so if the show went well, by the end of the 2 hours, all 40 people, we all knew each other a little bit better, and we all had inside jokes now. And it was just a fun 2 hours when it went well. Now, when it didn't go well, there was no, okay, guys, that's my time and getting off stage. You had to be on that bus for 2 hours. So if it was sucking at the 30-minute mark, you still had an hour and a half to go. And you had to go. You couldn't quit. And so, I learned to dig myself out of holes, and I really learned how to examine a crowd and be like, okay, these guys clearly aren't getting me, but why not? Did I say something offensive? Did I say something stupid? Are they stupid? Like, I've got to keep telling jokes, and at the same time, use a different part of my brain to be like, okay, what can I do to get this back on track? And, sometimes you figure it out, sometimes you don't, but that's not something that I necessarily learned just doing stand up in front of the same types of crowds all the time. So yeah, being on that bus was one of the best things for me as a performer. And it was just fun. Like, I enjoyed my job for over 10 years, and not a lot of people get to say that. So I really was fortunate enough to do that.
It's been said that when something gets that fun, it's not work. It's what you're doing. Oh, yeah. It's your life. And I bet the tips were pretty good too.
The tips were phenomenal. I'm not even going to lie about that. I got paid a decent amount per tour, but at least half of my salary came from tips, which was fun for me because it didn't give me an incentive to be funny, but it gave me an incentive to really connect with the audience instead of just telling jokes to them, actually get to know them. And even through the character, I was able, because it was just an exaggerated part. It was a little bit more Southern version of me. So it wasn't like some great character I came up with. I could have a few beers and be a little bit more Southern like that. That's easy to do. And so I got to really learn how to take what I did and connect with an audience.
I just think that's a great story, Brian. Thanks for sharing it. And there's so many things I wanted to bring up. One is getting the tips is a validation, immediate validation of the quality of your performance, of your entertainment. And that makes everybody feel good. And it's always nice to have a little bit thicker wallet so you're not worrying about the next day. But working those tours, like 2 tours a day for, 6 to 7, 5 to 6 days a week, that is getting on stage, people wouldn't think that that's a stage, but that's a stage. That's a presentation. That's a performance.
Absolutely.
You're learning acting. You're learning engagement with a different audience each and every time. I'm so glad that you made that specific, because that's the challenge of comedy, is that every time you go up, it's a different audience, and a professional comic learns to adjust to the audience. And then, like you said, if something isn't going wrong, you have to figure it out on the fly. You can't just say thank you, good night, and leave. You have to figure it out. Those were all great things. And I bet that during those tours, you really not only made their experience of the history of Nashville more entertaining and more engaging, but you as a person learned so much about your craft. I just think that would be a gift to any entertainer. Congratulations.
It really was, man. And looking back on it, I'm so grateful and fortunate. If we're being honest, it took me a couple of years to get to that point where I appreciated it, though, because, you know, at this point, I'm 29, 30, 28, something around in there. And I wanted to be a comic. I wanted to be on the road. I wanted to be, you know, opening for big names. I wanted to become a big name. I wanted to move to New York and get a sitcom, be on SNL, like all the things that new comics want to do, I wanted to do. And so 4 or 5 years into it, I look up and I'm riding around on a camouflage bus telling jokes to tourists. I was like, this isn't what I wanted my career to be. And I kind of had a very sour attitude about it for a little bit. And I had a guy here in Nashville named Dan Whitehurst. He's just one of those old road comics that are just funny dudes, and just, you know, got out on the road and worked it. We were talking about it one day, and I was telling him all this, and he goes, man, do you know how many comics would kill to not have to be out on the road and get to do comedy for their career and not have to leave the city they're in? And that moment, it really hit me like I need to quit being a little prima donna and enjoy this huge blessing that has been right in front of me this whole time. And I really started to really get into the character and really trying to connect with those audiences. And this would have been 2009 or 10, right around in there. So like Yelp and all that stuff was just starting to happen. And so, you know, the desire to get good Yelp reviews or good online reviews, and the desire to make the tip bucket grow, and like all these things, it meant a lot more to me now once I started realizing, okay, this is kind of cool. This is something not everybody gets to do. So it took me a while. It took me a couple years to get to that point, but I'm very glad I did. And yeah, looking back now, it was such a great opportunity.
Well, let me tell you, your friend was absolutely correct, Brian, because I can't tell you how many professional entertainers, and I'm talking about Seinfeld and Leno, Dana Carvey, Paula Poundstone, some of the people I've had a chance to work with that love their craft, love, you know, getting on the different big shows and being famous doing it. But there's thousands of other stand-up comics that had a great career, made a good living, but one of the downfalls is to make a living in comedy, you have to travel, and it's very hard on relationships. It's hard to have a family, and for you to get the gift of staying in town, doing your craft, and making a living, you really hit the trifecta of success. And it's good that you learned that. It's too bad that it took a couple of years, but your friend was absolutely right and bitch slapped you into reality that, hey, you've got it all. You've got your family. You don't have to travel, which, you know, sounds fun, but when you do it for a living, it's a pain in the ass. You know,
it's really fun at first, and then I respect any comic that has made his living on the road, even if we don't have the same comedy style, even if whatever, like I just respect any comic that was able, or any musician, anybody that's able to get out there on the road and make their living. Like I don't think people that are not in the entertainment industry understand how hard and truly rare that is for somebody to be able to do that out on the road. It's incredible.
Well, you know, whether you're Tom McTeague, Bobby Slayton, Steve Bruner, Jeff Jenna, Tim Bedore, a million non-famous comics that had great careers, they would tell you that the biggest and the most challenging part is constantly being away from home, living out of airports in a suitcase, and what it is to how difficult it is to raise a family. And I know a lot of really funny guys that, you know, once they established themselves, they could have made a living on the road, made the conscious decision to go become a show opener or do voiceover work. Stan Sellers is a great example. And Dave Coulier does a lot of cartoon voices. And to be able to just work in their town and make a living so they could be home with the family each and every night is a gift. And you had that in spades. So congratulations. What was the name of that tour?
So the name of it was the Redneck Comedy Bus Tour, which, like I said, that was a hard part of it too, because I think at first a lot of people got on thinking it was going to be some hokey, all shucks type show, and so I think that part I kind of fought for a little bit, but like part of embracing it was getting to be like, okay, I can still be smart, like I can still use crowd work skill, like, you know, it doesn't have to be this Crackle Barrel show, and so. Yeah, it was called the Redneck Comedy Bus Tour, and so once COVID hit, I quit doing tour. Well, we had to shut down, obviously, but Nashville shut down on March 17th, 2020, and my son was born March 19th, 2020. So it kind of shut down at the right time, and I became a stay-at-home dad for the first couple of years with him. So, oh, shoot, I forgot the question you asked. I started talking and forgot the question.
No, that's okay, Brian. I was just saying that the tour opened up a lot of opportunity for you. And even though it was called the Redneck Comedy Tour, I mean, and people may have been expecting Jeff Foxworthy or even something worse, like, you know, somebody off the show Beverly Hillbillies. Yeah. You were able to bring your type of clean, funny comedy and interaction and still share history and knowledge about Nashville. And that's why you made the tips, and that's why you were such a success. And you never need to apologize for that, because making a career entertaining people is really all of our ultimate goal. And you were able to do that for many years. It's too bad that COVID kind of shifted you, but, you know, after doing it for those many years, you've done that and you wanted to move on. And that's a great gateway for me to introduce that you're also a podcaster. Now,
absolutely. Yeah.
So we met because you had me as a guest on your podcast. Maybe you can explain to the audience how you got into podcasting, why you started it, and tell them about your show.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. So, son was born right when COVID hit, and luckily my wife, who was from San Francisco, still had her San Francisco job, so we had to kind of rebudget quite a bit, but we made it work to where I could stay at home with our son, which is, as anybody with a kid knows, is the best thing ever. And,
a real gift,
you know, oh my gosh. And I hate COVID. I hate that so many people lost so much stuff during COVID, but for us, it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because now we had this newborn. Nobody was coming over. Nobody was coming over to tell us how to raise our kid. We didn't have to shower. We didn't have to clean. Like, we just got to be at home with this newborn, and it was awesome. It was so cool. And I kind of, after about 6 or 7 months of being a stay-at-home dad, not the newness was wearing off, but like I started getting that itch where I need to be doing something creatively, you know, and didn't know what that was. I'd always just really done stand-up, so I started writing material about being a dad and that kind of stuff, and it was longer-winded than what good stand-up is. So I was like, well, maybe I'm not writing stand-up. And I started posting all these stories that I was writing to social media, and, you know, the ones that got a really good reaction, I would kind of stick away to the side, you know, and not knowing what it was for. And, you know, after a few months of that, I was like, well, I guess I'm writing a book, and I can't write a book. I couldn't finish a book. I can barely read a book, much less write a book. I was like, I'm not writing a book, but I kept stockpiling all this material. And my buddy that I do it with, Cooper, he's a plumber and is a dad of 3, and we just kind of met through our kids and always hit it off and had a lot of things in common. And one day I was driving across town, and this idea just popped in my head. I was like, why not a podcast with Cooper? You know, you guys connect well and you have a lot of interest, and you're both hardcore into being dads right now. That's our big thing in our lives right now. And so I called him and he was like, man, I've been thinking the same thing. I think we should do a podcast. And I'm like, all right, that's good enough for me. Let's do it. And we started, we've about got half of the first season done already. We're still doing editing stuff, but we started it with the sole intention of being a silly, fun, serious, sad, happy, just an authentic place for dads to come and be entertained, hopefully. And that's been our format.
I think it's great that you had a chance to realize that your creative juices were needed to flow again, and that going from doing all those tours to being a dad is rewarding in so many ways. However, you wanted to do something creative, and you and Cooper, give me the name of the podcast.
So the podcast is called Floor Snacks, and we tried every name. We tried every play on words of dad, of father, of podcast. Like we did 3 shows and had them edited before we finally came up with the name, because everything was taken. And we were sitting in his living room one day, just kind of like going, like brainstorming for the show we're about to do. And I don't remember what snack. There was some kind of food from his 3 girls underneath the couch. And I was like, man, you got a smorgasbord down there. And he goes, oh, that's just our floor snacks. And I was like, I'd never called him that, but I was like, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. Floor snacks. And of course we both Google it right now. Like, there's going to be 3 podcasts and a TV show called Floor Snacks, because that had been our luck up to that point. And we Googled it. Nobody had it. So we took it, and it has been probably the most enjoyable thing of my career so far. I think it has been so much fun. Every 4th episode we have a guest on, and I appreciate you so much for coming on and hanging out with us. And we have a topic we stay on, but it's the way we get there is roundabout dad stories, dad jokes, or not. Like sometimes we talk about just guy stuff, and it's just a kind of all over the place fun time that I'm very thankful that we're getting to do.
Well, Brian, thanks so much for having me on your show. And ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance, check out Floor Snacks. It's a great interactive podcast where Cooper and Brian get a chance to share some funny, they share some insight, and by being 2 working dads, get a chance to share that experience, which there's many, many more people out there doing the same thing. So be sure to check out Floor Snacks. It's available on all platforms. But Brian, I just got to say, you've had such an interesting career going from, leaving Kentucky to hit some classes and open mics in Nashville, to the amazing tours on the Redneck Comedy Bus, to doing your podcast, I think is a tribute to how stand-up comedy, whatever path it takes, can be very rewarding and lead you to unique situations. And I thank you for sharing your story today.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure. And I'll talk about comedy all day long. So yeah, anytime. I love it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to check out his podcast, Floor Snacks. And if you get a chance and you're in the Nashville area, keep an eye out. He's still performing from time to time on stage. But as we always do here on Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC, I have a little stand-up comedy to share with you. So stay tuned. Brian, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, man. That was a blast. I appreciate it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here's Brian Swinford live on stage.
Now, my wife is a huge Kenny Chesney fan. She drove me to go see him, and bless his heart, he's only this old. Have y'all ever seen Kenny live? He has a little booster seat up there. It was precious. And I grew up in the 90s, so anybody who went to high school in the 90s, y'all know who our big country star was in the 90s. Garth Brooks, that's right. He was huge in the 90s. I bet 280, 290, he had to be close, pushing through girls in the 90s. I'm convinced he would eat Kenny Chesney if he got the chance. They don't ever do a show together, because Kenny is scared. Tell him I think your tractor's delicious, little boy. I'll tell you what, my only problem with Garth, this is the only problem I got with him, is he had a song back when I was in high school. It was called That Summer. Do y'all remember the song I'm talking about? All right, if you don't, I'll just set it up real quick for you. The song was about when he was a teenager and he went to work on a farm, and it was owned by an older widow lady. And over the course of the summer, they ended up knowing each other biblically. Cloud the back 40, is that what y'all say? Shucking the corn, I don't know. But and in the song, this was teenage Garth's first time making the love, and he described it. If y'all remember the chorus goes, she had the need to feel the thunder and chase the lightning from the skies, which is beautiful until you start to think about it. Your first time, Garth, there was thunder and lightning. Really, Garth, on your very teenage first time? Because I got to thinking back to my first time plowing, and there was not any thunder and lightning at all. It was barely cloudy that day. There's some scattered showers, but it was not thunder and lightning. Y'all think so much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.